Sometimes we need to solve problems at scrum time. We've all been there where we have scrums that are never stable. As soon as they set, they go down. We reset. They set, they go down again. We reset again. And more pressure is put on us as referees to make a decision because people aren't coming, especially the backline players and the supporters. They don't turn up to rugby games to watch scrums being reset and repacked and reset and repacked. So what are the remedies that we can provide to solve these problems at setup time? Besides having a strong process at setup time and having strong indicators that we look for and what we need to see, we do have some small things that we can adjust from a refereeing point of view in order to maximize the possibility for the players to be successful. The first one would be making sure that we're going left of the mark, making sure that we're giving the players the time and the space they need to be able to get into that strong, comfortable pushing position. If we do have issues beyond that, some small problems to solve would be the tight head bind, whether it's on the arm of the loose head prop or not. The loose head bind, whether it's up on the body with the elbow in a neutral or up facing position, would be a good place to start as well. Binding is secondary, of course, to body angles and distance. If we can get that right at the setup before the ball even comes in, we're good to go. Looking at this video that I'm going to put up on the screen in a moment, we have a setup process about to start, a bit of a different camera angle for you. So, in the driving rain, fields cutting up in front of you, one of the remedies that you can provide is having the players adjust their distance and close the space a little bit more. Usually players will do this on their own as they tend to feel the ground slipping from underneath them before we realize that as referees. In any case, as the scrum starts to pack down, we see straight away that we have one team that's struggling to cope with the height of the other. The white team is setting up in a full low position, and we have the black and pink team setting up in almost a pin stance, and they're having trouble coping with this. As the scrum sets, right away we have on bind, we have all kinds of movement. The black and pink team obviously under a bit of pressure here. Their thinking is, of course, the old hit and chase, get the ball in as soon as possible. The problem that this has here is we don't really have a stable platform to push off of. The white team is not in a good position. They generally were in the other pictures we looked at, but we have spines at different angles. We have props at different heights. So we just have a plethora of problems and things that could go wrong with this scrum here. And so once we do get a bit of dominance coming in from white, but initially it's not as clear as the pictures we saw before. And we end up with a situation where we're refereeing in a bit of hope that the ball would come out. So when we do see pictures like this, it usually comes from the setup process, making sure that we do have the players in the right spaces. We have the guys with a clear ability to put their legs where they want to, put their hips where they want to, so they can be in that strong, comfortable pushing position. And then the last ingredient is making sure that the scrum's not moving when we're going from crouch to bind to set. Having those moments of stability are extremely important. And even though we don't have ownership over when the ball comes in, we do have ownership over when we say set. And there's nothing wrong with the we'd call it the pre-ball in reset. It's once the ball goes in and we have scrums going forward and scrums going backwards where we don't want to reset. But obviously resetting with a purpose during the setup process, identifying an issue, that there was too much movement or players weren't in the right spaces. Those can be quick wins that we can apply. And we generally will get a bit of player buy-in as well, because then we have something specific and tangible that's understandable, as opposed to blowing a reset after the scrum's gone down, or gone forward or backwards, where we at least have one set of players who are in complete doubt of the message that's being sent to them by the referee. So again, watching the scrum go on, we don't have a clear picture of who's going forward because of the setup here, and then the referee is pressured at the late stages of the game into making a decision for a team who look to have been dominant, going in and up on the angle. And again, the body language of the players is a bit of frustration. We see some arms up in the air. Again, we shouldn't always go on player reactions, but we can maybe manage this by having better setup and maybe not allowing this scrum to go beyond the bind process. And again, just letting you watch it where our opportunity is to provide a remedy. We have the scrum packing down. We have a bit of a rush from the back row players. We don't have quite both shoulders on. We have lots of movement on bind, and then there's just too much movement to give a credible outcome here. And we have a scrum that might have been going forward, but that gets clouded a little bit because of the excess movement from both teams. And we end up with a less than ideal decision and probably a less than ideal outcome that pretty much doesn't reflect the nature of the pushing contest when we had better conditions. Now, other factors involved here are new props. We have 17, 18, 17. When those types of numbers are on the field, we know that the context of the scrum changes, and the importance of the setup is all the more. Building rapport with front row forwards, with scrum coaches, is super important, especially in the club game where we don't always have the opportunity to have those performance reviewers who are that filter process between what gets said from a coaching point of view, what gets said from a refereeing point of view. It's super important that we also don't rely too much on referee coaches for our input for scrummaging. Very few referee types have been involved in the scrum. Very few referee people have been involved in the coaching of a scrum. I mean, a lot of that has to do with the fact that front rows are extremely specialized and in demand, and a lot of them play until their bodies cannot hold up under pressure anymore. Also, refereeing, especially if you want to move on to the ranks, involves a fair bit of movement. And people that have had a good career in the front row, obviously they've had to put on a lot of size and they've had to put their bodies through a lot. So having that much movement is a big ask for an old body who's had to be through a few scrums. So that being said, taking our opportunities, before and off the field, on the field, to listen, that's a big one. It's been, I started quite young as a referee through injury. So learning to listen was a big life skill that I didn't necessarily have, in the early days. And listening to those veterans, in the front row, to those scrum coaches of what their point of view is. It might not always be, genuine and objective, but you're going to at least get little pieces of information, that will contribute to your empathy, or what the players are trying to do. So what the role of a loose head prop is, what the role of a tight head prop is. If that's not clear to you, that tight head's prop job on his own ball is to stay down and not go backwards. Ask a tight head prop, hey, what are you trying to do when it's your put in and you're under a bit of pressure? He would not tell you necessarily what he can do to negate pressure, but what he'll tell you is at least what he is looking to achieve from a positive standpoint. Same thing for a loose head prop. On the opposition ball, what is he looking to achieve? How is he looking to put pressure on that tight head whose job is to be a person that doesn't go backwards on his own ball? How could the loose head attack, so to speak? What's he trying to do? What does he have to do with his body in order to achieve that credibly? Asking a scrum coach, what kind of outcomes are you hoping for? Are you hoping for the ball to be played away and have a nice attacking platform, or are you looking for penalties in certain areas of the field? Are you looking to push tries over the line? What is it that you're out there to do? And just understanding what different props and different coaches are out there to do gives us an indication of what actually matters at scrum time. And it might make us a little bit more efficient in the work we do. Most referees have to have other jobs. It's not quite a lucrative practice throughout the world. So, you have to be smart with the time you spend. And I think having that time with those front row players is such an essential piece to our understanding as referees of that scrum process. And of course, on the field, just never guess, never assume things, and if we have to blow penalties, never making it more of a big deal than it is. We penalize the action, we don't penalize the player, and we have to accept that there is a possibility that we're wrong or that there was another factor that we didn't see from the other side, and just operating with humility with these people generally will contribute. You might not get their buy-in and trust, but at least you will not get their animosity towards you right off the bat. Well, go back to your basics. Trust your process. Trust your setup. Take your time, and don't guess. Remember, the scrum is simpler than you think. If we get our setup right, it's a pushing contest. Reward the team going forward. Don't look for trouble. And again, if we can play away, if we have good possession, we play away. Players will always forgive you for missing something, missing a penalty, rather than blowing something that didn't happen. So just to summarize, what we wanted to do today, we want everyone to be able to build confidence and have a process, have a setup process that they can rely upon as a script at every scrum. We want people to be able to have a bit of tips and tricks. So obviously those little indicators at setup time, those indicators when the ball goes in of who's going forward and how we can make sure we reward the right team. That's a massive piece to take away, is just to separate the fact that yes, it's a massive thing with lots of dynamics going on, lots of different channels of force, but we have to understand that there's a setup process that's got to be followed. Once we get there, who's going forward, and if they're not able to maintain that dominance, that team going forward, why, and how can we deal with it? Finally, I mean, big picture stuff, it is a pushing contest. We want to reward the team that's winning the pushing contest as much as possible. And that, in effect, will allow us to get our stakeholders on side. It will allow the scrum to be a bit more of a spectacle. It will allow the scrum not to take over the game so much, much to the chagrin of some of our front row fraternity friends. But at the same time, it will a good scrum, good setup, and reasonable outcomes at the scrum in terms of teams that are dominant getting rewarded. That generally adds to the credibility of our game, and it takes away the criticism of the scrum, because rugby union, the scrum is one of the pieces that makes our code such a great form of the sport. There are other codes of rugby. We have sevens, we have league, that obviously don't value the scrum in the same way that rugby union 15-a-side does. So just understanding that if we trust our process and if we make the scrum not bigger than it is, but at the same time respecting it, we can make it more interesting for everyone involved. And that's referees, that's referee, beyond referees, it's players, coaches, supporters, and anyone wanting to get involved in our game. In any case, I'm always happy to connect with anyone, and I can't thank you enough, Scott, for asking me to be a part of this. And I look forward to working together again in the future.